In a maintenance shed outside Pearl Harbor, a Navy machinist set a black rubber block on a steel table and told 4 officers it could save more ships than another destroyer squadron. Nobody laughed at first. That came after he opened the folder. The folder held 38 incident reports, 7 pencil graphs, and 1 hand-drawn sketch so crude that a commander would later call it garage nonsense in uniform. The machinist's name was Caleb Rusk. He was 36 years old, broad through the shoulders, permanently nicked across the knuckles, and ranked so low in the Navy's paperwork system that his own proposal had to travel through 3 desks before it was important enough to be ignored. He was not an admiral, he was not a naval architect. He had never commanded a vessel in his life, but he had listened to engines for 20 years, and by March of 1945, he had heard something the Pacific Fleet did not want to hear. The ships sent to clear Japanese mines were making the exact sound those mines had been waiting for. Not almost. Not occasionally, exactly. The men sailing into those minefields believed they were hunting hidden explosives. Caleb Rusk believed the explosives were hunting them back, and the proof was sitting on the table in front of him. A black rubber mount, a stack of dead men's reports, and a number nobody in the room wanted to say out loud, 940. That was the current projected casualty figure for the next major mine clearing phase if the Navy kept sweeping the old way. 940 men accepted before the first ship ever left harbor. The number had been typed neatly, copied twice, and placed inside a planning binder. Caleb had written something else in pencil beneath it. Unnecessary. To understand why that word nearly ended his career, you have to understand what mine warfare had become in the last year of the Pacific War. By early 1945, the American advance across the Pacific was no longer just a battle of islands. It was a battle of approaches. Every landing needed a path through water that looked empty and was not. The beaches could be photographed. The gun positions could be bombed. The airfields could be cratered. But the water held its own kind of intelligence. Japanese engineers had spent years building mines that did not need to see a ship. They only needed to feel it. Some listened for engine frequencies. Some waited for pressure changes beneath the hull. Some were laid in patterns that looked random until a ship disappeared in the middle of them. And then the pattern became obvious in the worst possible way. The Minesweeper's job was to go first. Not the battleship, not the transport, not the ship carrying generals and maps and official confidence. The Minesweeper, small hull, thin steel, crowded engine room. Men who knew that if their work was successful, the world would see the invasion. And if their work failed, the world would see smoke on the water and a gap in the formation. Most of the crews were young, 19-year-old signalmen, 22-year-old firemen, cooks who could tell from the tilt of a coffee pot whether the sea was about to get ugly, engineers who slept in clothes stiff with salt. They did not talk much about mines. Sailors are practical people. They talked about mail, they talked about coffee, they cursed leaky boots. They argued over baseball scores weeks out of date. But every man on a sweeper knew the sound, that steady vibration through deck plates, that iron pulse under the feet, that rhythm that meant the ship was alive. To Caleb Rusk, that rhythm was not just noise, it was a fingerprint. Before the war, he had worked in a truck plant outside Muncie, Indiana, where his job was to keep commercial engines from shaking themselves apart on bad roads. He learned that engines did not simply move metal. They transmitted themselves through metal. A badly mounted engine could turn a frame rail into a tuning fork. A properly isolated engine could make the same machine quieter, safer, harder to read from the outside. That had mattered in trucks. In the Pacific, he believed it mattered more. The first report that caught his attention came from a minesweeper damaged near a channel entrance in late January. The official explanation was ordinary enough. Mine contact, probable acoustic trigger, severe hull damage, casualties listed. Head operation continued. But Caleb noticed the timing. The mine had detonated not when the ship entered the field, and not when it crossed the center of the marked lane. It detonated when the engine load changed during a slow turn. He pulled another report. Same thing. Then another, the detonation points were not scattered like bad luck. They clustered around moments when engine rhythm shifted into a narrow band. Not every ship, not every mine, but enough. Enough to make his stomach go cold. For 2 nights, Caleb sat in a corner of the maintenance shed with the incident reports spread across a crate lid, marking each detonation by engine condition, speed, bearing change, and estimated range. A pattern formed. At first, it looked like coincidence. Then, it looked like possibility. By the 4th night, it looked like murder by procedure. The Navy was sending minesweepers into acoustic minefields with engine mounts that carried vibrations straight through the hull and into the water. The mines did not have to guess. The ships were announcing themselves. Caleb's fix was almost insulting in its simplicity. Rubber isolation mounts. Not experimental electronics. Not a classified weapon. Not a new hull design. Rubber cut, layered, bolted, and compressed between engine cradle and frame, so the ship's own machinery would stop broadcasting such a clean signature into the sea. He estimated the work could be done in less than 10 hours per vessel by any repair crew that knew how to hold a wrench and follow measurements. Cost per ship, less than the price of repainting a wardroom. He wrote the proposal in plain language, because plain language was how shopmen survived. Page 1, the problem. Page 2, the pattern. Page 3, the modification. Page 4, the expected reduction in transmitted vibration. He signed it, he forwarded it, and then he waited. The first rejection came in 6 days. It said his conclusions were interesting, but outside the established review structure. The second rejection came after he attached more incident data. It said the sample was too small. The third came after he added a crude test using a tug engine and a hydrophone borrowed unofficially from a Radio Shack. That one said his methods lacked formal engineering control. By the 4th submission, the tone changed. He was ordered to stop circulating technical recommendations without authorization. The warning was signed by Captain Lionel Voss. Voss ran mine warfare logistics for that section of the fleet, and he had the kind of face that seemed designed by a committee to discourage interruption. He had graduated from Annapolis. He had worn dress whites before Caleb had ever seen the ocean. He had spent 3 decades learning exactly how naval ideas were supposed to move. They moved up from officers, they were reviewed by qualified boards, they were translated into doctrine. They did not crawl out of maintenance sheds in grease pencil. So when Caleb was finally summoned to Voss's office, he understood before he sat down that the meeting was not about mines. It was about place. The office was cool. The desk was polished. A framed chart of the Central Pacific hung behind Voss's chair. Caleb stood until he was told he could sit. Voss did not offer coffee. He held the proposal between 2 fingers, as if it might leave oil on him. "Rusk," he said, "do you understand what you are claiming?" "Yes, sir. You are claiming that current sweeping procedure is amplifying the threat. I'm claiming the engine signature is inside the trigger band on several mine types we've already encountered." Voss looked down at the paper. "And you know this because you used to work on trucks." Caleb took one breath. "I know machines talk through their mounts, sir." Voss stared at him. Then the laughter came. Not loud, not cruel in the theatrical way. Just one short breath through the nose, which was somehow worse. "Mine warfare is not a truck suspension problem." "No, sir." "Then stop treating it like one." Caleb did not answer. Voss leaned forward. "You are a machinist, a useful one. From what I'm told, be useful. Fix what you are assigned to fix. Do not mistake access to damaged equipment for authority over fleet doctrine." The proposal landed on the desk face down. "That will be all." Caleb walked out with his ears burning and his hands steady. That detail mattered. His hands stayed steady because humiliation can do 2 things to a man. It can make him smaller, or it can remove the part of him that still hoped permission would arrive cleanly. Caleb stopped trying to persuade the chain that had already decided where truth was allowed to come from. He started looking for a door in the wall. That door was Lieutenant Commander Miriam Hale. She was 42, sharp-eyed, and widely regarded as difficult by men who confused speed with intelligence. Hale worked in a technical evaluation unit that reviewed odd proposals before they were either buried or accidentally became important. She had a reputation for asking the question everyone else avoided. Not, "Who sent this?" Not, "Has this been approved?" "Does the data hold?" Caleb found her at 0510 in a mess hall with a cup of coffee and a folder full of trouble. He did not give a speech. He slid the folder across the table. Hale read the first page, then the third, then the incident chart. She turned back to the first page and read it again. The coffee went cold. Finally she asked, "Who else has seen this, Captain Voss?" "That explains the warning." Caleb said nothing. Hale tapped one finger on the graph. "These detonations are too clustered." "Yes, ma'am. And your mount test? Crude." "I didn't ask if it was pretty. It showed a reduction." "How much?" 40. 8% through the frame member, maybe more if we machine the mounts properly. Hale looked up. "How long to prove it on a vessel?" "Give me one small sweeper and 3 nights." She watched him for a moment. Then she closed the folder. "I can give you 1 tired sweeper, 2 angry mechanics, and 48 hours before someone notices what I requisitioned." For the first time in 11 weeks, Caleb smiled. Not because the fight was over, because it had finally reached metal. The vessel was the USS Sanderling, an old coastal sweeper with paint scabbed off her railings, and an engine room hot enough to make a man swear at God by breakfast. She had been pulled for boiler maintenance and was considered too worn to be anyone's priority. That made her useful. Hale signed the paperwork under the category Noise Reduction Inspection. Caleb gathered 2 machinists, 4 crates of rubber stock, a portable press, and every favor he had not already spent. They worked at night. Not because it was dramatic, because it was the only time nobody asked why the engine cradle was hanging off chain hoists. The first mount split under compression. The second flexed too much. The third held, but transmitted vibration through the bolt sleeve. Caleb changed the sleeve, changed the washer pattern, changed the compression ratio. Shaved 1 layer thinner with a knife he sharpened on a file. At 0317 on the second night, he stood with one hand on the engine bed, while the Sanderling's motor turned at low load. The deck still trembled. A ship could never become silent, but the hard metallic bite in the vibration had softened. The sound was still there, but its teeth were gone. Hale arranged the demonstration for March 19, 1945. She did it properly, because once you break a rule, the next move must be airtight. A control vessel of the same class would make 3 passes over a listening array in the harbor. Then the modified Sanderling would make 3 passes at the same speed, same engine load, same turn angle. The measuring team would record the acoustic signature and compare it against known trigger bands from recovered Japanese mines. Captain Voss attended because he had been forced to attend. 2 other officers came because they smelled a fight and did not want to read about it later. Caleb stood behind the equipment table with sleeves rolled to the elbows, trying not to look at anyone's face. The control vessel went first. First pass. The needle climbed past the red pencil line. Second pass. Past the line again. Third pass. Passed the line so cleanly that one of the younger technicians stopped pretending not to stare. Then the Sanderling came around the marker buoy. She looked unimpressive. That helped. No one expects history from a tired little ship with bad paint. First pass. The needle rose. Voss leaned slightly forward. It rose toward the red line and stopped below it. Nobody spoke. Second pass below the line. Third pass. Below the line again, the official reduction came back at 61%. Not 48, 61. Enough to move the vessel's signature beneath the likely trigger threshold of the acoustic mines they had been meeting in the approaches. Captain Voss did not apologize. Institutions rarely apologize at the moment they are correct. They translate embarrassment into action and call it judgment. He turned to Hale. How many vessels can be modified before the April sweep window? Hale already had the answer. 20. 6 if we run 2 crews. 30. 4 if nobody sleeps. Voss looked at Caleb for the first time as if seeing a man instead of a mistake in uniform. Can the mounts be standardized? Caleb said. Yes, sir. How fast? They already are. He lifted a packet from beneath the table. Drawings, measurements, cut patterns, installation order, failure notes, all written while everyone else was still deciding whether he belonged in the conversation. Voss took the packet, his jaw tightened once. Beggin. The modification spread through the repair yards like a secret with calluses. Crews were told it was a vibration control upgrade. That was true enough. They were not told that the upgrade existed because a machinist had accused the fleet of helping enemy mines find American hulls. By mid-April, 31 sweepers had received the isolation mounts. Not every vessel, not enough to make the danger disappear, but enough to test whether Caleb's ugly little idea could survive the sea. The first operational results came during a mine clearing phase before a contested landing zone in the Western Pacific. The charts had marked the water as high risk. The crews did not need charts. They could feel it in the officers. Orders got shorter in mine water. Men stopped joking before turns. Even the engine rooms changed. A good engine room. Crew can talk through anything. Heat, noise, fear, fatigue. But in mine water, talk becomes practical pressure. Temperature load. Bearing change. Nothing extra. The modified sweepers entered the lane before dawn. Gray water. Low cloud. A horizon smeared flat by morning haze. The first pass found nothing. The second pass triggered a mine behind the sweep gear, far enough off the hull to throw water over the stern but not tear the ship open. The third pass found 2 more. By the end of the operation, several mines had detonated at distance. No modified sweeper was lost to acoustic trigger during the main sweep. 2 were damaged by fragments. 1 man broke his arm when the blast threw him into a bulkhead. 3 others were treated for burns and shock. Those injuries mattered, but the casualty estimate for that lane had expected a blacker result. 6 ships at serious risk. More than 100 men likely killed or wounded if the old acoustic profile held. Instead, the sweep opened. The landing force moved. And in a maintenance office 3 islands away, Caleb Rusk received the first numbers from Hale. He read them twice. Then he folded the message and put it in his shirt pocket. A younger mechanic asked if it was good news. Caleb said, "It means we keep working." Because the enemy was working too. That is the part simple versions of stories leave out. They make the invention the finish line. They make 1 test, 1 success, 1 stubborn man. And the problem behaves as if it has been defeated forever. War does not work like that. War studies whatever hurt it yesterday and tries not to be hurt the same way tomorrow. Japanese mine warfare analysts began noticing the change within weeks. Acoustic triggers were not producing the expected kills. Detonation patterns had shifted. American sweepers were moving through lanes where they should have been punished more heavily. The conclusion was obvious to anyone good enough to face it. The Americans had altered their signature, so the Japanese altered the question. They began relying more heavily on pressure mines and the approaches that mattered most. Those mines did not care how quiet an engine was. They did not listen. They waited for the physical displacement of a hull moving through water. A ship could whisper and still die. The first warning came on May 8th. A modified sweeper struck a pressure mine during a routine clearance run near a reef passage. The blast lifted the bow as if the sea had punched upward with a fist. The hull split forward of the engine room. The ship stayed afloat for 19 minutes. 7 men died. The isolation mounts had not failed. They had never been designed to answer that kind of mine. But grief is not an engineer. Grief does not read mechanism notes. Grief sees a modified ship at the bottom and asks who changed it. The inquiry began before the survivors were dry. Caleb's name appeared in the documents. Voss, now under pressure from above, suspended further installations pending review. Hale protested. The protest went nowhere. For 4 days, the program that had just saved ships became a convenient shape for blame. Caleb was not removed from duty. That would have been too clean. He was left in place with no authority, no clearance to continue, and every reason to understand that his idea had become dangerous for the wrong reason. So he did what he had done the first time. He went back to the problem, not the politics. The mine. Pressure mines needed a hull signature. A hull was only a shape moving water. Could that shape be faked? He began drawing on packing paper. Not a vessel. A ghost of a vessel. A towed pressure sled built from reinforced rubber chambers, timber bracing, and adjustable flooding valves. The sled would ride ahead and off the quarter, displacing enough water to mimic a heavier ship while keeping the sweeper outside the lethal center of the blast. If it worked, the mine would detonate on the ghost, not the crew. The first drawing looked absurd. It looked like a raft designed by someone losing an argument with a mattress. Caleb knew that. He also knew mines did not care what a device looked like. They cared what water told them. For 3 nights, he built a scale model in a wash tank behind the shop. He used dye to track displacement, fishing weights to adjust depth, a cracked pressure gauge no one else trusted. Hale found him there after midnight with sleeves wet to the shoulder. "You're supposed to be waiting for the inquiry," she said. Caleb did not look up. "Mines won't." That line made it into her memorandum. The inquiry concluded that the lost sweeper had been struck by a pressure mine unrelated to the acoustic isolation program. The finding cleared the mounts. It did not erase the dead. Voss reinstated the program. Then Hale placed Caleb's new pressure sled drawings on his desk. This time Voss did not laugh. That was progress. He read the pages in silence, asked 7 questions. 4 were hostile, 3 were useful. Caleb answered, all 7. At the end, Voss rubbed his eyes with the heel of one hand. "How long for a prototype? 6 days? You have 3. I'll need 12 men. You'll get 8. I'll need rubber stock. You'll get what the yard has. I'll need a vessel." Voss looked at him. "You always need a vessel," Caleb said. "Yes, sir." The prototype was ugly enough to make officers nervous. That was its first virtue. Elegant machines invite speeches. Ugly machines demand tests. The pressure sled used 4 long rubber chambers held in a timber, and steel frame with valves that let the crew tune depth and displacement. Towed correctly, it created a pressure pattern larger than the sweeper towing. Towed badly, it tried to drown itself, twist sideways, and drag half the deck crew into profanity. The first trial failed, the sled rolled. The second trial failed differently. The tow line angle made the pressure signature too weak. On the third trial, Caleb changed the bridle geometry and flooded the chambers unevenly. The sled settled into the water like a stubborn animal deciding, finally, to pull. The controlled minefield test was set for June 3rd. 7 inert, instrumented pressure mines had been laid in a marked corridor. 1 live charge was placed at the far end behind a safety offset, because paper success was no longer enough. The sweeper entered the lane at 6 knots. The sled ran ahead, half submerged, leaving a broad, wrong-looking disturbance on the water. The first instrument mine registered trigger, then the second, then the third. On the observation boat, one officer whispered, "It's reading the sled as the hull." Caleb heard him. He did not turn around. The live charge detonated 30 yards off the sweeper's projected danger line. Water rose in a white column. The tow cable snapped. The sled vanished into foam and broken rubber. The sweeper rolled hard to port, then came back. No hull breach, no fire, no casualty. Just men gripping rails and staring at the place where a cheap, ugly ghost had died for them. The test report used clean language. Effective pressure simulation achieved. Mine activation at standoff distance confirmed. Further refinement recommended. Caleb read the report and hated how small it sounded. Some things are too important to be left in sentences that clean. By late July, the acoustic mounts and pressure sleds were being installed together on selected sweepers. Not enough. Never enough. War always asks for more time than the living have. But the doctrine had changed. That was the thing. The Navy no longer understood the sweeper as merely a brave small ship entering danger first. It began to understand the sweeper as a signature, management problem, sound, pressure, distance, threshold, deception. The ship did not survive because men were brave. Men had already been brave. Bravery was never the missing part. The ship survived because someone finally admitted the mine did not respect rank, tradition, or paperwork. It respected physics. And physics had been sitting in a maintenance shed waiting to be heard. Then history turned. The planned invasion that everyone had been preparing for never came in the form they expected. Bigger weapons, bigger decisions, and a surrender announcement moved the war onto a different page. The minefields remained in water many American sailors never had to enter. Some of the pressure sleds were never used in combat. Some of the modified sweepers came home with fresh paint over old fear. The casualty figures that had haunted the planning binders became hypothetical, which is the strangest kind of mercy. A man can be saved by a device never used. A ship can survive because the war ended before the channel opened. But the lesson did not disappear. After the war, the reports moved through technical schools, then shipyards, then design offices where younger engineers read them without knowing the smell of the shed where the idea began. Rubber isolation became standard thinking. Signature reduction became doctrine. Influence sweeping became a field, then a curriculum, then a set of specifications so normal that eventually no one remembered how strange it had once sounded. Caleb Rusk did not become famous. He received a commendation written in language so careful it nearly erased him. Valuable assistance in vibration control studies. That was the phrase, valuable assistance, as if he had passed someone a wrench. He went back to civilian engine work after the war, designing mounts for delivery trucks and factory generators. The same hands, the same logic, less ocean. When a reporter tried to interview him years later, Caleb answered the technical questions and avoided the personal ones. Asked whether he was angry that the Navy took so long to listen, he reportedly said, "Machines don't care how long you took. They only care what you fixed." That sounds modest. It was not. It was an indictment with its sleeves rolled up, because the cost of those lost weeks had never vanished. Between Caleb's first submission and the Sanderling demonstration, men kept entering mined water with ships louder than they needed to be. Some came back, some did not. The records can count hulls, they can count casualties, they can count repair hours, and material cost and operating days saved. What they cannot count is the idea that died in some other office, because no Miriam Hale was there to read page 3 twice. That is the part of this story that should make the room go quiet. Not that one machinist was right. That happens more often than institutions admit. The frightening part is how close he came to being right in silence. A captain's laugh almost buried the mount. A routing stamp almost buried the data. A warning letter almost taught him to stop submitting. And if he had stopped, the ocean would not have announced the mistake. It would have collected it one hull at a time, one engine note at a time, one family telegram at a time. Years later, one of the modified mounts was found in a storage crate during a naval inventory. Black rubber compressed at the corners, salt staining around the bolt sleeve. Nothing heroic about it. No gold plate, no inscription, no statue pose. Just a piece of material that had once sat between an engine and a frame and changed what a mind could hear. That is the shape of the truth. Most life-saving ideas do not arrive polished. They arrive ugly, cheap, easy to dismiss, carried by someone whose title makes the room stop listening before the evidence starts speaking. Caleb Rusk did not defeat mine warfare. He did not end the Pacific War. He did not save every ship. But he saw that men were dying inside a pattern. He proved the pattern. He built against it. And when the enemy changed the pattern, he built again. That is not luck. That is competence under pressure. And it is the one form of courage institutions struggle to recognize, because it does not salute before it tells the truth. The sea never cared what rank a man wore. It only answered the pressure he put into it.